providing your experience in crypto industry, could you tell more about the difference between regulations in Switzerland right now and what's coming in the European Union?
Switzerland has the structural difference is we have a regulation that is principle-based.
Yep.
It is technology agnostic. Yeah. And last but not least, it's driven from the bottom to the top. Yeah. I mean, people would even say that Switzerland with the direct democracy is a decentralized government, right?
Yeah.
So that allowed very early adoption, and you heard about the term of crypto valley.
Yeah.
Which was basically driven by the city of Zug, yep, giving Vitalik the approval to pay in Ethereum, right?
Yeah.
So it was open for the conversation, open for innovation, and there was basically empowerment locally, and from that everything
and then it's
moved up,
growing.
Which was completed then, I think it was summer 2021, with the whole DLT law framework, which allows now, you know, real-world assets, as we called a year ago, we called it security token, to be fully regulated, which I think is very important because crypto is only the beginning of a disruption. Yeah. I see blockchain as the internet of value, replacing the infrastructure that currently exists in finance and being more integrated in service industry and trade industry. And therefore, the role of money goes back to the initial role of enablement, of measurement, rather than, you know, an objective in itself, which then allows you to move into various other industries. Having said that, there is now MiCA regulation coming in, right? And the European Parliament understood and recognized the urge in, I think it was September 2020, there needs to be a regulation in Europe. And it's now coming into play in this summer. For WASP or CASP providers, as it calls, you know, I think they have a period of 18 months for implementation.
Yes, and then it will be another step.
In Europe, you had obviously Estonia and Malta being very progressive initially, and created then a bit of, you know, crowding into these locations.
Like a tire for...
Yeah, you probably remember many locations came either from Malta or Estonia. Yeah. But the regime in Malta significantly changed, also part of their digitalization strategy about 3 years ago, and changed the regime, right? I'm not a lawyer, but lawyers tell me that the Estonian regulation is a minimum as substantive than the MiCA regulation that kicks in later. So for instance, in Zonda Crypto, when I'm a board member, you know, was also regulated in Estonia, is regulated in Estonia, and was part of the 1,500 companies, now gone through, you know, 2.5 years of significant audits, reviews and what have you. Very happy that, you know, having this license, the number of players moved from 1,500 to below 30. Yeah. And it is believed that after the MiCA being live, it's going to be around a handful or a bit more.
Yeah, and maybe it's also been related to so-called crypto winter.
Also, obviously, absolutely. And I think, you know, the cost of implementation, regulation is obviously an important part of it and costs a lot of money, right, with the whole licensing regime. However, it's fair enough because the consumer wants to have protection. And I was on a plane this morning where it was a bit challenged, you know, does the end consumer really care about regulation since there is still significant volume on these half-regulated, regulated platforms? Well, I think it is, right? You have seen already, and Zonda Crypto is a beneficiary, that people moved from these platforms in more regulated platforms for one simple reason. If something goes wrong, you can call up, you're protected. If you are on a half-regulated, unregulated, nobody needs to bother, right? They can randomly shut down payouts or what have you. And, you know, obviously, you can go through a hassle and a litigation and what have you, but it's not the experience you want. And I think the crypto community starts to realize it's not really taking away innovation. It's obviously a challenge between stability and agility, but doing in a smart way and professionally, this trade-off can be managed in an effective way.
Do you think that one day we'll have in crypto something like we have in banks, minimum amount of deposit, which is insured by the government policy?
Look, I mean, I'm the founder of Amino Group, right, Seba Bank, and there is a minimum standard of 100,000.
Yeah.
It can go in that direction, or there is an equivalent of cash that can be considered. However, in Switzerland, you have the Security Act, right? So if it's off balance sheet, your assets are protected anyway.
Taking about other jurisdictions, but I think you work globally as well. What do you think about the whole world? I mean, would it be possible to be as much clear what to do one day between every different countries? It's not possible.
Yeah,
I think right now.
It's you have like the international bodies, right? Like Bank of International Settlement that applies certain standards when it comes to capital requirements and what have you. But you see, in the US, right, which is a dominant force, is you have, I think it's 26 bodies that have something to say, and the regulators are even debating each other who is in charge
It's not
of the regulation. Nevertheless, right, I mean, with BlackRock and the ETF approval,
yeah.
And it's now crypto is part of every strategic asset allocation. So every asset manager or wealth manager or capital company needs to have a view about crypto and how they integrate it in the overall portfolio structure, which is great.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's clear that BlackRock, with its significant size and its importance, was pushing that agenda, right? Yeah. And basically forced. And then I think you have the election by the end of this year, and you have Biden and Elizabeth Warren that are negative, right? And then on the other hand, you have Trump, which his rhetoric was positive, and I think that is underpinned by the adoption dynamics in the US. So we will see what's happening. But overall, I'm positive, because it's not only a movement of geeks, so to speak, right? Yeah, it's a real demand, particularly in the context of global monetary policy and geopolitics.
I think it's time to go to the last question that we ask to everyone. Uniformly use or know your customer rules for Web3 protocols or any other crypto industry. It will be for the best or for the good or for the worst for crypto industry at the end of the day. So you will de-anonymize some of the geeks that want it to be.
Well, I think know your client has its legitimation, right? It's just a question, where are the thresholds to do a full onboarding, and that is debatable, right? I mean, there's sometimes at €1,000. I think some countries were at 10,000 reduced it. Cashless society, CBDC. There is always transparency is good for markets, right? And transparency is good for the investors and the consumers. However, at what point it's good for the government and the regulators, right? So there can be a tipping point where, a benefit starts to become a liability and privacy is not insured any longer. And there are all sorts of ideas that are floating around. You map ESG goals with your finance, with your consumer spending, to your digital identity, and then your creativity can go crazy, what that means and what it doesn't mean, right? But I think in the Western society we will have, I hope, the power and influence to make sure that the trade-off between privacy and security is understood and is found.